Okay, you guys, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. It's 7:02 p.m. and I don't think we need an hour today. That's just me.
I'm all for that. I just went for a walk. It's really nice out.
I did mine this morning in Rock Creek. I took the trail and it was, man, it was nice.
Yeah.
Got a little jog in there, so I was beyond ecstatic.
Went for a bike
so-
ride in Rock Creek and it was
Oh,
fantastic.
did you? Yeah,
Yeah.
I came down Chestnut and I passed so many people that were heading right into the park. It was amazing. Walkers, runners, bikers. I mean, it was a great day to get out. And it still is. It's still real nice out.
Yep.
So after this, I'll be hitting the patio. Okay, let me get Ron. So just to get started, I think Bruce sent around the notes of the last meeting, which was a recap of pretty much where we were. And just for folks coming online, we're working on the pre-survey interview discussion guide. I sent around a draft document that I added to that guide. Peter saw it earlier today and added some comments and edits to it. Bruce or Jim, did you guys get a chance to look at that?
No, I did. If this was this afternoon, I've been out all afternoon, so I didn't see
Okay.
that.
Can you
Yeah,
get your
I'm
email
good.
or pull it up, Jim? Bruce, did you get a chance to see it?
Yeah. Yep. I'm cool. I say,
Okay.
let's go. Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't, Jim, there wasn't like much change to it. I did adapt in the background some of the submission from John Higgins and Ron Eichner and company. I don't know everyone that Ron submitted or worked with Ron on his submission, but I kind of combined some of the things those two folks had submitted just in terms of the background information. Peter added, well, Peter, you could talk about the section that you added and why you added it. So it kind of recaps where we are and how we got to, where we currently are, that we're still going to continue further engagement with the community through doing the survey. It breaks it down, Jim, into steps. So step 1 is the background information. Step 2 are the questions as you proposed in the modification. So the first question being kind of the open-ended question, and then instructions if the things that we had mentioned aren't hit upon, then we could start hitting those after the first question. The third step is just a wrap up. So it's just some 4 bullet points on how to wrap the interview up. We also discuss a time frame for the interview as to 1 hour to be fair to both groups. We want folks taking up 2-3 hours. It's just not necessary. And that's pretty much it. Peter, you want to go over the paragraph you added?
What I want to do for people who are just joining, who are not members of the committee, because there's been confusion in the past about whether we're talking about the survey or we're talking about our reaching out to either groups or individuals about what should be in the survey. What Lisa is talking about is a guide we're writing to do the interviews with Chevy Chase Voice and with Ward 3 Vision, so that we take the same approach to each one, we take the same amount of time and so on and so forth, just so that's clear. All I added is that is a paragraph that says, we understand there are a lot of issues that are of concern to the community. We need to bear down on the civic core. We may well field further surveys on other issues, more broadly zoning along Connecticut Avenue, bike lanes, et cetera, et cetera. But for this purpose, we need to bear down on this. And the other thing I said, something that all of us have said to each other in all of these meetings so far is we want this to be short. So we ask people as they think about, we ask these two groups as they think about what they want in the survey to be very parsimonious in what they offer us. So, and I just sort of bulked up a few of the stuff at the, I added a bullet at the beginning, just saying that OP has made some changes in the zoning for the civic core site, not addressing the others. That's,
Yeah.
that's
Okay, so if no one has any major problems with that,
No.
that could serve, okay, as our guide. I think we should have, I talked to Peter, I think we should have 2 leads on each group. I think that when we do the invitation to each group, we should do a written invitation with the entire ANC copied. Basically asking for a date to conduct the interview. So maybe we could give them 3 options or 2 options that's good for all of us and let them come back with a proposed schedule. And that way we're all, on that. Then I'll schedule it with Zoom and we can get it kicked off.
And are we gonna say as many people from these groups can come as they want?
I think for interview purposes, that's not necessarily a good idea. But I would not assume they would do that, but we don't know what's going to happen. I would say no more than 2 to 3 people.
Okay,
Well, 3 is a lot. I mean, for this, 3 is a lot. I would say,
but so then if they propose 2 more than 3 people, we'll cross that bridge if we get to it.
Yeah, and we could say in the invitation 2 people, 1 to 2 people. I really don't think anything beyond 2, I think is a bit too much.
I mean,
I agree. I agree.
An alternative approach would just simply be to say in a letter, we need to bear down on this. If you guys want to lobby us and have a whole lot of people on board, that's your choice. But if we're really going to work down to questions, which is what we're after here.
Well, I agree, Peter, we could say that, but I think we have to set the parameter to set the stage. I mean, if there's a lot of people on the call and we're getting a lot of feedback all across areas, it's not going to help us try to come up with the best, questions that we're trying to come up with. I mean, I think on organized groups and committees, they could probably find the top 2 spokespersons that could convey their messages in an efficient manner.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking for, not chaos.
Can I take a couple steps back from this and just try to frame this in terms of my own understanding of what the utility is of talking to the groups, which I have been in favor of doing, of course. We're in the phase of the development of the survey. I think we've all agreed in defining kind of the what. What do we need to be asking about? How we ask it is what we're asking the consultants to help us do. So they're waiting, as I've noted, for us to feed back to them the what. They have gotten already the discussion guide in the initial draft, so the themes are there and they're already looking at those. And so these 2 interviews are helping us further identify the what.
Right.
I think that's the most productive use of that hour. If we try to wordsmith questions with folks and get into that in an hour, we'll get nowhere. We'll just chew up a whole bunch of time. So I think if we preface or we indicate in the note to everyone, and some folks perhaps in these groups are on the call right now and they've otherwise heard this, to focus on what they think we need to be asking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we take that on board and we feed it into the development of the questions. And with the note as well that when we, as we've discussed, as we develop the survey, the draft survey, the questionnaire, we intend to test that with the community and get further feedback from community members as to how these questions resonate or don't resonate, right?
Yeah.
So just as we explain to folks, that way they understand the nature of the input, that these groups, neither group is driving or determining what the questions are. They're giving us input, and then we take that into account.
Yep.
I know,
And
I know it's self-evident, but I just thought it'd be good to kind of put it out.
Yeah. We're all on the same page.
I agree with all that, Bruce. Now, I have another idea that may not be a good idea, but I'm gonna run it up the flagpole anyway. I would love it if we could get some sense of priority from these people on the questions they want to ask. Given that, like Peter said, we don't want this to be too long. And maybe they're going to give us a lot of questions, maybe they're not, but if they, and maybe we ask that in the invitation, that some sense of priorities among the questions would be really, I think would be helpful, but I don't know, maybe that's asking too much. I don't know.
I think, Jim, is a good idea. I think it'll emerge in the conversation. Folks will probably lead with what they think are the most important issues for them.
Okay.
And kind of just take it from there. But again, at the end of the day, these are two groups representing significant points of view in the community, but there are 14,000 residents that we represent.
Right. So Bruce, with that said, do you want to draft an email?
Yeah, sure.
And then we can, if we could get that, if.
I'll draft it in the morning, send it to you guys for comment.
That's what I was gonna say. If
Yeah.
you get that as soon as possible, I know everybody, if not on vacation, packing to leave to go on vacation.
Yeah, I'm on vacation, but I'm happy to get up in the morning and
Me
get out.
and Peter have been packing for the last 2 days, and we're not going together on vacation.
Thank you, thanks for that stipulation. Look, we are talking about this. Are we setting this is gonna happen in the next week or I mean, we're gonna ask for these meetings, suggest sometimes, but we're gonna ask for these meetings very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. That's the idea.
Well,
And
the
like I said-
trickiest part is going to be finding days and times. Now, how are we going to do that amongst ourselves?
Well, I can only tell you that I'm happy to carve out whatever time because we need to get these done this week.
Yeah, me too.
I agree. I mean, I think the answer here is that Thursday for both separately, Lisa and I are travel days. So we are not, I mean, that is not a good day for us, but I mean, I can make, I'll just, yeah.
And we might want to give them, I'm just thinking, I mean, if we could aim for, and Tuesdays, we're always together. I mean, even if we did Monday and Tuesday of next week's,
We're not going to shoot for this week. We're not going to do it at all.
The reason why I'm kind of thinking about this week might not be good is just to give them time to formulate their questions. You know, we got to give the organizations time to also process it. We've been processing it for a while, but they'll get the email tomorrow, and that gives them a little shy of 7 days to kind of get it together. If we start with Tuesday, that'll give them right at about 6 to 7 days, which is probably sufficient. But
although Chevy Chase Voice has already sent us, input, right? So we've got their stuff. They probably could sit down with us, to be honest about it, inside of 15 minutes and say, here's what we.
I mean, if they're ready, I mean, we can say Friday and then maybe 1 or 2 days next week.
Cool. Okay. All right. I'll do the note in the morning.
Okay. So
can I, Lisa, just take a quick stab at kind of reviewing then the timeline which we had in the framing document 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, but just to update that. So
we're gonna have to update it. Let me just before you start, someone had asked in the chat what groups Chevy Chase Voice and Ward 3 Vision are the two that we're going to interview in terms of the pre-survey interview discussion.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Super. And again, just to be absolutely clear for anyone who tuned in late to this conversation, I don't think there are too many, there are only 8 people on the call. But we are going to test run the survey with a group of community members to get their feedback. So we're going to solicit additional feedback on the actual survey instrument so that we are as clear as we can possibly be that the questions we've drafted will resonate clearly with people and there won't be confusion. So anyway, with that said, Today being the 8th of August, a week from today being, of course, the 15th, if we get the interviews done and the input to the consultants in terms of the what, they can start crafting questions. And in fact, I would suggest that with the discussion guide that we already have, with the themes and issues outlined that we've already identified, that we go ahead and say to them, go ahead, get started on what we have now in terms of some of these questions, and we'll continue to refine it with the further input that we get from the interviews. Does that make sense to you guys? That way they can go ahead and get cracking on starting to begin to put together questions, or would you prefer to wait?
No, I think that we all have to start. So I am not opposed to them starting with what we have, what information we have, but I think us as a body need to start crafting questions as well.
Oh.
And then we'll have a we'll have to parse which is the best question. But we've gotten some submitted from groups. I know Peter has also worked on some, so there's some that we already have a handful. Chevy Chase Voice, I believe, has submitted some stuff. So there's a lot of information to go through to start crafting. So I think probably the meeting on the 15th, we should come with questions in hand.
Okay, so with that in mind, their utility to us is in their methodological expertise and understanding how to frame these questions, right?
Yeah.
So with that, I will certainly defer to them, at least in terms of how I look at this and how I would myself interact with questions, and let them sort of, with the themes and issues we've identified, have a go at framing some questions. On some substantive issues, obviously, we've agreed there needs to be input there, which we can provide, others can provide, which is the groups that we're talking to can be helpful on. Okay, so we can then let them know they can begin to work on those, and that next week we would have some draft questions come to the committee. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, we should work on our own questions and have them ready, have some ready at least by our next meeting on Tuesday. That's our deadline for our questions, or a kind of deadline.
Right.
It's
Okay.
The thing there, though, that Jim and Lisa and Peter, and we need to sort of think through this. For there to be efficiency in that meeting on the 15th, we wouldn't want to have, we can have whatever we want. We can have whatever you want. It's just a question of what's efficient. If each of us is developing questions and we have an hour meeting, you can imagine that we won't get through a whole lot. The idea would be to see, in fact, if with the themes and issues we've identified, questions they frame would meet criteria we set forth. We're ultimately the judges on this, and see, in fact, if that's helpful. Or however you want to do it. I'm just thinking about time remaining and efficiency in our meeting process. That's all. However you want to do it.
Can I make a suggestion here? I mean, actually, I wish they were, Susan and some of the others were here today, and I should have given Susan generously gave me her contacts. I could have reached out to her. But it seems to me that we ought to try to formulate sets of questions that handle major issues like housing, affordable housing, height, density, lot occupancy, and so forth. In trying this myself, and in looking at what both Voice and Vision have submitted, I have questions not about the wordsmithing, but about just the general technique. So, for example, with Ron Eichner's Ward 3 Vision's contribution, a lot of the questions are structured around reasonable, unreasonable. Now, the question to Susan and the others is that reasonable or unreasonable? Does it give us, is it too open-ended? Is it da-da-da? And then I have structured a bunch of questions that sort of say, are you personally interested in affordable housing in Chevy Chase? And then a second tier on the community center library site. And then how, if at all, would your mind change if X were so, if Y were so, if Z were so? Again, I've got a theory for why you asked the question this way, but I don't know as a survey expert whether that technique just leads to chaos. And I mean, it's that sort of, so I think a lot of what we should be asking these people is not so much what the questions are as what
The best way to ask them.
way to ask it, the
Right.
technique, yeah.
Right, but I agree with you, Bruce, that we're not gonna be wanting to bat around all these different questions, but I think that it'll be a good exercise for us to try to do it ourselves, and then I won't have any pride of authorship in what I do, but it'll help me understand what other people are doing, and you know, it'll help get me educated in survey questioning by trying to do it myself.
Right, so I'm asking the three of you, essentially, how do we ensure that as commissioners and the commission that we own this survey? This is our survey with all the input we get, right? At the end of the day, it's the commission survey. How do we achieve the input that we want to have into it, and then benefit from the specific expertise as to framing questions so that they are methodologically sound?
So I think we can do that by, well, a number of ways. I mean, here's my concern. The consultants are not technical experts on this topic, neither then are we. So we're going to have folks that are technical experts kind of look at our questions and make sure they make sense. They're going to lend their expertise to make sure that we're asking them in a methodological way that's you know, good for the overall survey. But I do not think we can get around with taking a stab at the draft. And we have a lot already to work from. What I would do is suggest that the commissioners look at our themes. We only have four major themes and the other category. And then under each theme, we have sub bullets. So I think what we can do is whoever wants to start drafting, and that includes the consultants as well, start drafting under those themes. So start putting your questions together, send them to me in advance. I will collate all the questions and all the data and send them to you all in advance of Tuesday. And then in advance of Tuesday, our homework would be to look at what's submitted, and you could rank order them, or you can say which ones are definitely no-goes, which ones are goes, but start, collating them into some type of framework for the survey consultants to take a final stab at, as well as technical experts. But I do think that we have to have ownership in these questions. I mean, we've, especially some of the older commissioners, we've been dealing with this for a couple years now. So,
okay. So wait, Lisa, you want us to send you the questions?
I volunteer to do that. I mean, just send them to me. I'll draft them. I'll
okay, you want them before our next meeting then, like on Monday?
Yeah, definitely.
On Monday.
Well, you can get them to me. Yeah, definitely. I would say by Monday.
Okay.
And then I'll turn them around and send you all. And then the other thing is too, we have to keep the rest of the commission in a loop on this. I don't want at a special meeting at the top of September to be the first time that they've seen the questions, because they will go nuts, as they should. Right. So we need to get them these questions on a rolling basis, and what we're doing on a rolling basis, so they have time to weigh in on what we're asking as well. And they might have questions. They might have things that they want to contribute. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Let me go to Bruce. I know you had something, Bruce, and then Ron Eichner.
So I just want to be clear on what we're asking the consultants to do, of course, because they want to be clear on what they're to be doing. And I'm a little not clear at the moment. I thought we were thinking that we would set for them the what piece, and we would have them address the how piece. But I'm hearing us now say that we're also going to address the how piece, all of us individually, and you're going to take all those and then we're going to send them back to the consultant. So I'm not exactly sure what we're proposing to.
Well, I just don't think they had the background and technical expertise. You know, like one of the things I saw in a question somebody submitted was it was how they framed the question of building height as a trade-off for affordable housing, which I thought was an appropriate framing. It was something that me and Peter talked to Joel yesterday, and we talked about building height. We also talked about lot coverage, and he said, but hey, bottom line, this is how we're going to tell the community, this is a trade-off with the number of units of affordable housing. So my concern with them is they don't necessarily have the framework and the understanding technically of maybe how we should incorporate that as like a global question. I do think that the information that we give them will help them get it there, but I'm not necessarily 100% comfortable with having them develop that. I think that we can develop it and they can refine it. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Right.
So, and we can talk about it a little bit more. Peter, before you, let's go to Ron and then you. Ron Eichner?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it's a new computer. I've spent the whole day in computer hell.
Me too.
I totally agree with both Lisa and Bruce on this. I think the kind of framing that Lisa's talking about is still part of the what.
Yeah.
The how, I think you really need to get the experts involved. And I raised my hand because, Peter, when you were asking people, you know, would you like it better if it's this way or that way? Historically, design preferences that are not accompanied by drawings or images are very, very difficult. So I think if you guys are going to start to frame questions, maybe you need a little primer or something from the experts on the best way to do the how, the best way to frame it when you know you're talking to people who you know, are realistically challenged as far as imagining a lot of these design things, because maybe you need to be talking about activities or feelings and not a percentage of lot coverage or even in my view, or even a height expressed in feet.
Okay.
That's
So-
my 2 cents.
Thank you. Ron, Peter, then Andrea.
This is both addressed to Ron and to Bruce. I am not suggesting we say, would you like this? Would you like purple? Would you like green? Would you like 6 stories? Would you like 2 stories? You know, rather it's something like this. What's your initial view, naive view of X? Let's just say affordable housing in Chevy Chase. How about on the community center site? If it were true, then the sub question is, if it were true that most firefighters, police officers, teachers, service workers, waiters who serve Chevy Chase cannot afford to live here, how, if at all, would that change your answer 1? If it were true that, you know, some so you basically say what you're trying to explore is what elements would alter people's view, or what elements are central to their view of this. Now, what I said to Bruce is, you know, I've got a whole theory for why this is a great way to ask questions, but I don't know squat about surveys. And so it seems to me that the thing that we're trying to get from the, and look, they are welcome to write questions too, and we can go back and forth, but the thing we're trying to get is what you've talked about repeatedly is methodologically, does this approach or the Ron Eichner approach in the stuff he submitted, does this work as a survey, or are we just, aiming at the wall if we do it that way? And if it does not work in this way, then start talking to us about how we get at those issues, but in a way that works. So that, I think, to me, that is the task before the consultants. Enough said.
Okay. Andrea?
If I can go back a little bit just to clarify something. When you talked about questions that each of the two groups are to submit and then interviews with each group, are those two separate events?
Yes.
Okay. And I just wondered, references made to technical experts, and I was wondering who they are.
We don't have it. We don't have anyone assigned. Is
Okay, are these,
that are in the ZDD that we can certainly draw on, that are, I think, technical experts in this, and that will probably be them, as well as community members that show up here that have technical expertise in some of these areas.
okay,
Lisa, I think we're referring, we have 3 residents who we've been talking to. Susan, Geely.
Well, those are consultants. I think she's talking about when we say like technical experts on like the reconstruction terms, design elements, stuff like that.
Substance experts.
Yeah.
substance experts, okay.
Yeah.
Andrea, go ahead. I was going to follow you.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we go back to the themes that are in the discussion guide that kind of broadly reflect, as we've discussed, categories of themes and issues that we will most likely want to ask about. And we think about how many questions, we don't have to worry about the number right now, but we don't want a survey that's going to take a half an hour for people to complete. So we've been talking about a relatively compact, efficient survey asking the core questions. Some of the questions that would derive from the themes and issues that we've identified are straightforward, right? They're not technical.
Right.
Your vision for the community center and civic and library site. Are you in favor of housing at the site? The things that are on people's minds, the things that people are talking about. And as we get down more into areas of, say, affordable and asking people about their preferences or their views on affordable housing and what would constitute affordable, yeah, we get into some areas where we have to provide some definitions for people so when they complete the survey, they know what we're asking about, right? But I think as we get into this, it'll be interesting to see how everybody approaches this. A lot of this is intuitive, common sense, fairly straightforward, because we have to bear in mind that the people answering this survey are not going to be able to parse a lot of complex material, not because they're not smart enough, but because there isn't time to do that in the survey that we want to field. So it's going to be a pretty, it seems to me, 10 to 12 question survey in addition to the demographic variables that hit on the core things we need to know as a commission to make an informed judgment as to where people's minds are on this. There is in some a need for technical expertise, yes, but we're not quizzing people on their understanding of zoning.
No,
right?
and I don't want to simplify it, Bruce. You're absolutely right. We could ask a question about, for example, building height, but I do think it's important maybe to also say the lower you want, the less affordable housing you want. So there are some nuances there that people that haven't been involved in this discussion are not going to be aware of. And I think, without prolonging it, we're kind of beating around the bush here. There is no harm. The commissioners are going to submit questions. Absolutely. I know Commissioner Gore will, who is also chair. I am going to have my round of questions. And we can knock out which ones are the best, which ones we want to proceed on. And the consultants, as Peter said, can submit their questions as well from what's been generated thus far or from what they've heard thus far. And then post that, they can certainly help us formulate those questions so they're asked in an appropriate methodological way, regardless of whether that comes from us or from them or from outside groups. They're going to be invaluable in that particular point. So I think we have a pretty decent game plan, and we have to allow the commission an opportunity to submit questions. We have to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm all in favor of that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not
Okay.
arguing to not do that.
Yeah, I want to remind everyone too that our objective here is to get information that can help us in our RFP process, right?
Yeah.
And to solicit people's views on the basics of the whole development, right, Jim? I mean, that's
Right.
that first objective, right? Their key
Yeah.
areas of concern. So
Right.
let me just then suggest this, guys. I'm with you on all this. It all sounds great. We're going to need more time, though.
Well, we don't have a lot of time.
I understand that, but if we're talking about everybody submitting questions and going back and forth and looking at those questions, we're going to have to, we may have to schedule a little bit more time of meetings for us to process our questions.
Okay. So I'm good with that. If we want to meet twice a week as opposed to once a week, we can obviously do that. But one of the things that we have to keep in mind is the survey. And I spoke with Peter about this. I believe I stated this maybe on the 31st. The 31st was so chaotic, or the 24th, I can't remember. But just to have the discussion with the survey team, when DMPED presented their schedule, that absolutely changes our schedule. So remember their first, our RFP session is going to be the end of September, 1st of October. So in talking with DMPED, they felt that the best position our survey could be in to influence them is to have that survey data for the first meeting. They said that they would even go as far as extending the RFP to capture our survey if it's not done and submitted to them timely. But they felt that the best influence of our RFP process would be to have that final survey data available for that first meeting. And you all might have a variety of views on that, but I think, you know, our number two both of our objectives on this survey are critical. But I have always, and I'm just speaking for myself as an individual commissioner, my primary objective is to influence this RFP with community output. That is my primary number one goal, is to make sure what comes out of this survey in terms of elements, because that RFP, our RFP process is the community's opportunity to say, here are the critical elements we want in this RFP. Outside of that, we don't have that much of a voice, because it's once that RFP goes and is issued, that's pretty much it. We're not going to do a lot of influencing, in my opinion, post RFP. And folks can disagree with me about that, but I've seen a lot of RFPs, and it's very hard to influence them once they're out. So I think, you know, for me, I would love to have this survey presented there. The other reason for that, and I've talked to Peter about this too, we're not going to get, so our goal is to hit every house in this ANC with this survey. However we do that, mailer, you know, postcards, whatever. We're not going to see that in our RFP process. We're not going to get 100% of our community sitting at the table. We're probably going to get the same folks that probably showed up for a small area plan, that have showed up for surplus and hearing, as opposed to the people that are on the peripheral, you know, the people that don't really pay attention to this every day and kind of like what they see, might have some issues with, you know, certain elements of the redevelopment, but are generally, you know, sitting on the sideline. So it would be nice, and I think that we could get a much broader response with our survey than you're going to get with folks attending our RFP. So I think if we could give them that in advance and have it ready for that first meeting, we have an opportunity to give them a much more influential view of what our community favors in terms of elements. So that's just my spiel on that. But we do, irregardless of that, we have to take their timeline into account and, decide when is the best time to get this survey wrapped up and submit it to them.
So we've had a timeline whereby we would be doing this in September and reporting it out in October. That's not what I'm hearing you articulate.
I don't,
No, I think it's the same. If we could get it out in early to mid-September and turn it around, and I don't think we need to have this survey out for, 30 days. I mean, if we had 30 days, that's great. But if we do the 100% touch base early, when we first publish it, whether that's mailers, there's a number of things that we could do to make sure people understand it's there. I think our response rate is going to be very high.
So we're talking about going into the field right now on September 5th.
I don't know if we'll get into the field that quick.
I think we can, and we should aim for that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we just do it.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, is that the commission's on record by way of resolution on May 8th of asking DEMPED to hold on until we can provide the input, including a survey.
Well, they agree to that. I'm just giving you what they said would be the best way to influence our RFP process. They have gone on record and said that if we turned it in late, if we turned it in November, they will extend the deadline of the RFP just to get our survey.
Okay.
But they were very honest in saying how they felt that when we should submit it to be the best influence on the process.
Got it.
can I just say, look, I understand what Lisa is saying. I actually don't think that we need to stay right on their schedule, in part because they have yet to commit to a date. You have to remember, in the period they're talking about this, what I believe will be one meeting, this hour RFP.
It's going to be 2 meetings, Peter.
Well, that will be grand. So that takes, going to take them longer. But in the period when they're talking about the first one is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and my betting right now is that they're going to be first, second week of October for the first meeting. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
The first week, but
yeah, but then the last meeting is the last meeting when it's still an open discussion. Is going to be late October, early November. So I don't think we differ on this, Lisa.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just giving you the timeline.
I'm not drinking margaritas and sitting back.
No, Peter. I'm just giving you the honest timeline, and we have to just be realistic about the timeline. The first meeting is going to take place probably the first week in October. And that's when they're saying that they would love to have the data to be the best influence. And that first meeting, and I want to make sure the community, and Jill's has said that, and if you look at every RFP process, and I've looked at everyone in the city, the first meeting is when they will develop the elements. That is when they will sit down, have a very brief discussion about what RFP is, and they're going to break the community up into groups, small discussion groups, and they will come back with formulated elements at that first meeting. So that's when it happens. It happens at the first meeting. The second meeting is just a follow-up to the first meeting to say, okay, here's here's elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that the community agreed upon were key in the first meeting. So really everything that's going to critically take place occurs in that first meeting. And that's going to be probably the 1st of October.
Can I just say two things? First of all, just a question to you, Lisa. Jill at the July 24th meeting would not commit to a second meeting. Has he subsequently?
Yeah, he said he had to go back and ask for about that.
No, let me clarify that. There has always been a second meeting. The second meeting is a follow-up. What we asked him for in terms were 2 meetings for the discussion of the elements. So I don't want to be
That's a simple
confused
question of
on
what-
that. So we were essentially asking for 3 meetings. We were
Oh.
asking for 2 meetings to discuss elements and then addition to the follow-up. What he is saying is there's 1 meeting to discuss elements and the follow-up meeting behind that. So no, I've talked to them over and over and over. It is beyond their head. If we want another meeting, you might as well make a meeting with the mayor because it's not in DMPED's call. This is not their thing.
Okay, the other thing I would just like to say, and again, I am not trying to relieve the pressure on us to do something, but we do have, I mean, I think that when the proposals come back, we're gonna have a great deal of influence on reviewing those too. So the idea that the jig's up after our RFP, I think is putting too much pressure on us and on this survey. So in any case, those are 2 ways where I think we have slightly different tone differences. And Bruce, I ultimately don't think we're fielding in September, results in October, I think still where we are.
Okay, that sounds good. One thing that I think would be incredibly helpful for DMPED, or if I were DMPED, I'd want to know this. On the broad questions of where the community stands with respect to any housing at all on the site, because we know the community is divided on this. I would not want to be DMPED hosting a meeting, walking in without having the benefit of knowing what they're walking into, because you full well understand what that could produce in terms of a reaction by the community to what the city wants to do. And I think it's helpful to have the sort of take the pulse of the community in advance of that. So
About what? Wait a minute, Bruce, before your statement just kind of went over my head. Can you repeat what you said again?
I think it'd be helpful for DMPED to know where the community is. Where it's what we're saying, right? On both of the objectives we've outlined for the survey, not only what the community would like to see incorporated into an RFP, but what
Yeah.
the community feels about the development period. Because that's going to weigh on DMPED in terms of how it approaches the community and how it moves forward in developing the RFP and thinking about interacting with the community. I certainly would want to know that if I was Gilles coming into another conversation with the Chevy Chase folks.
Okay, so
Okay.
you're agreeing with me though.
I just thought you, I think DMPED is coming into the meeting from the agency perspective of developing affordable housing on the site. I mean, that's kind of where they're, yeah.
I totally understand that. And of course, our perspective is in reflecting where the community is, why we're doing the survey and talking to people is our input into that process, which is what we're statutorily designed to do. So we each have a part of this. We occupy different roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
guys
I think
agree.
they
You guys
understand
agree.
that.
I mean, right? You guys, the 2 of you agree. I think they know what they're walking into, and I don't think we need to give us a survey to.
I agree too. I think they 100%. So one of the things, and Ron, we'll go to you. There are members of this community that are contacting DMPED a lot. They've received a lot of feedback at the hearing. I mean, I do think they know exactly, the major issues that members of the community or the concerns that this community have. I think they absolutely do know that. But I do agree with you that having that survey information and seeing it all, and I mean, if we get a really great response rate, that says a lot. I mean, I think that carries a lot of weight that you're right, they should pay attention to and want to see that prior to coming in the door, and especially for their contractor link.
Yeah, but Bruce, I want to once again challenge the identification of what the community wants with the results of the survey. Those are 2 different things. And as Lisa said too, the response rate is going to be important. We're going to get 100% response rate. Okay. So this is going to tell them what the survey results are. It is not going to tell them what the community voice is, because there is no such thing.
But absent, it's an interesting point, and we haven't had the discussion on this, Jim, but for those people who aren't reflected in the survey, which is that other part of the population you're indirectly referring to, the people, for example, who don't take the survey, right? So if one says the survey represents the community, your point is that, well, what about the people who didn't take the survey? And I hear you on that. But on what basis does any one of us judge what those people have to say?
Well, one way to do it is what Council Member Fruman referred to when he spoke to us on the 24th. At that meeting, he said he talked about affordable housing there hundreds of times during the campaign, and he took Chevy Chase with 75% of the vote.
Jim, I mean,
I hear you.
honestly, I mean, if you're going to take that, then why don't we just give up? And if that's the signal, if that's what you take as an important signal, then fine. What's our role?
Because there's a lot more to decide than that. I mean, how much affordable housing, how much green space, how tall the buildings. What I am questioning is the bigger question of, are we going to have affordable housing or not? From what I can see, that is more or less decided, and we should be focusing, as Councilmember Fruman said, on shaping the project and not trying to, dictate.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
know.
big
except
picture
the fundamental thing, and again, this is a discussion for another day. It's more philosophic in nature. We're not council members.
That's right. Exactly my point.
Well, we're here to represent what people have to say in the community, is my point. So and that's something we can talk about further. I'm all on board with all of this in terms of how we've structured the survey, informing the RFP, capturing the citizens, the folks' views on the broad thrust of things. I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, let me go to Ron Eichner. He's had his hand up for a bit.
All right, I just had two comments. One to Bruce, to your point, the mayor's been to this site twice and talked about a commitment to affordable housing there. It's the centerpiece of her administration to increase affordable housing, particularly in Rock Creek West. And it would just be quixotic to think you can turn that around by a survey among 20% of the people who live in the ANC. But that's just my opinion. To the schedule, my observation, having been involved in this a long time, is that the 12 things or whatever that questions that we want to ask are going to bubble up pretty quickly from you guys. And once those are given over to the experts who know how to do this, they may be able to turn that into a survey really, really quickly. And I think if you're looking to streamline this in order to meet DEMPED's schedule, maybe you want to look at all this testing and all this stuff that's supposed to happen between your meetings and getting the survey out. Maybe there's a way of shaving some time off there, because this is not rocket science. There's only a handful of issues that are really on the table.
I agree with that, Ron. And I think the idea of testing is only to make sure that with the sort of community of respondents that we haven't somehow, in how we frame questions, inadvertently, as best we possibly can, miss something. Remember, we had the conversation a couple of weeks ago where one community member said, well, wait a second, in the demographic variables, you haven't accounted for people who are handicapped. Well, none of us had thought of that. So that's just one tiny example of how testing is worthwhile. I think we're on track. I think we can do what we need to do in all of that. Yeah.
Okay, folks, I am going to get ready to wrap us up. We're right at the top of the hour, 7:57. I want to keep these meetings to an hour so that we're productive. But our next meeting will be on the 15th at 7 p.m. If folks could get me proposed questions by Sunday, I say the 12th, then that'll give me, or the 13th, then that'll give me the 14th to turn them around to you.
Okay,
Okay, so just to be clear, I will do in the morning, a draft invitation to the two groups. I will also convey to the consultants what we're asking them to do through this meeting, which is to go ahead and take the themes and issues identified in the discussion guide and begin to frame some questions around those. Do I have that right?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay, and I will let them know that commissioners will also be doing questions and that you're going to collate those questions, you're going to, and then play those back, and on the 15th, we'll be looking at questions.
Yep.
And they should plan to attend.
Definitely.
Okay. The only thing about this meeting, to be clear, we were still on the what, not the how, and therefore, since Susan and Anna couldn't do tonight anyway because of work obligations, so, and Steve, actually Steve as well. Okay, that's good.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for community members for coming, and that wraps us up. If you guys have, just for the folks online, if you guys have questions that you wanted to submit, I know some have already done so, please send them to all of the survey committee members. So that's myself, Commissioner Nash, Gosselin, and Sherman. By the 13th, we'll take them into consideration as well. And I don't think we're going to get this decided on one meeting in 1 hour. So we'll probably have a couple meetings, you know, to try to wrap this up.
And it might be wise, Lisa, just quickly to go ahead and think about booking another meeting next week following the 15th, just to have it on the schedule.
Okay. All right.
Remember to shut off the recording.
I will.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
don't forget to send it to me for posting.